assured the and PSNI maintain ongoing close liaison with local public representatives on both sides of the border in relation to this matter and have been proactive with regard to road safety enforcement measures in the area. The Deputy would appreciate that what is at issue is principally an operational policing matter, and accordingly what is important is ongoing police cooperation. My colleague David Ford and I regularly discuss the general issue of cooperation between the Garda Síochána and the PSNI, and we are both satisfied that cooperation between both forces is excellent. With respect to the specific issue raised by the Deputy, I am assured by the Garda authorities this ongoing policing cooperation is borne out by the recent joint operations.
Deputy Smith.
McCann Corley, I want to thank the Minister for his reply, and indeed since I tabled that question originally to Foreign Affairs, the position has improved in recent times, and that's to be acknowledged. And the Clones Town Council have been a local statutory agency who have constantly brought this matter to our attention. And could I just take the opportunity, Minister, to commend members of Garda Síochána and the Captain Monaghan Division and the local members of the PSNI in Fermanagh on their policing work in this particular area. It is an extremely difficult area to police because if you travel from Clones to Cavan, you actually travel through County Fermanagh on 3 different occasions. So, in previous questions, I asked on Taoiseach to ensure that this particular issue is kept on the agenda as appropriate at North-South Ministerial Council meetings, and the Taoiseach undertook that, along with the Minister for Justice, he would raise the matter with Minister Ford. And it's just that we want to assure and reassure the local community that this matter will be given constant attention. The policing vigilance will be there at all times. Because I had numerous people speak to me, particularly older members of the community, both in Fermanagh and in Monaghan and Cavan, the 3 counties concerned, who were extremely frightened at the outrageous driving practices, joyriding, donutting and other dangerous driving practices on particular stretches of that road, particularly in Fermanagh on different occasions. And in conclusion, Corla, there is also a constant volume of ambulance traffic between Monaghan General Hospital and Cavan General Hospital, and we want to ensure that no tragedies occur on that particular stretch of road. So I would ask the Minister to ensure that, as appropriate, he will continue to keep this matter under consideration along with Minister Ford.
Thank you.
Say to the Deputy, firstly, I thank him for his comments, and I too share his what he says about both the Gardaí and the PSNI. They've done very important work here. What has been taking place here is an outrage. It's a scandal. It's completely unacceptable. It places lives at risk and cannot be tolerated by either ourselves, the Garda Síochána, or indeed by the authorities in Northern Ireland. And it is important that this type of activity stop, and I can give the Deputy absolute assurances that the work that has been engaged in by the Gardaí and the PSNI will continue, that everything possible will be done to curtail and bring these activities to an end before some tragedy occurs. And I think that all of those involved in policing on both sides of the border deserve our thanks for the work they've done so far on this issue.
Deputy McHugh.
Go Margaret, Cam Corla, just on that same question, I would like to maybe reference maybe a potential minister that you may examine in light of Brendan Smith's, Deputy Smith's suggestion around keeping communities informed, reassuring communities. I think if I stand to be corrected, I think in the 1980s there was a more formal structure between superintendents on the southern side of the border with their counterparts in the northern side. And while there are very good relations on north-south basis, and you're absolutely correct, and guards can pick up the phone to their colleagues, PSNI colleagues, and there's a very good relationship, but maybe we should look at a more localised structure, rather than Deputy Smith and myself having to come into this House, or Deputy McLaughlin, raising issues with respect to our localised areas. And obviously the intelligence gathering will be confidential, but it's about a feeding-in mechanism where communities have ideas, communities have suggestions. And maybe to throw out, Minister, and I don't want an answer on this, maybe for you to digest, the actual idea on the model of community policing at a county level and at a town level is actually working. It's a good model, and maybe we should be looking at a possible model, as Minister Smith talked about, Fermanagh Cavan, there's no reason why we couldn't be looking at a Tyrone, Derry, Donegal type structure where the community could feed in and also be reassured if there's questions that need to be asked. Thanks, Ken Corley.
Thank you.
If I could say to the Deputy, I'm supportive of any cooperative structure that might provide added value and facilitate cooperation in policing matters between North and South.
Thank you.
The position, of course, now is that there's a far more sophisticated engagement and deeper engagement between the Garda Síochána and the PSNI than would have been there in the 1980s. And we also have the local policing committees which can make an input into these issues. But I'm very happy to give consideration to what the Deputy is saying.
Thank you. Question number 10, named of Deputy Collins, Joan Collins.
I propose to take questions number 10 and 17 together. These questions relate to the issues surrounding the allegations concerning the cancellation of fixed charge notices. Fixed charge notices are provided for under the Road Traffic Act 2002 and are an alternative to prosecution. They give a motorist the opportunity to acknowledge the offence, pay the fixed charge, and where the offence is a penalty point offence, incur the appropriate penalty points. While the issuing of a fixed charge notice does not constitute commencement of legal proceedings, it normally leads to a prosecution if the charge is not paid. There can be circumstances, however, where the fixed charge notice may be cancelled in accordance with Garda procedures drawn up in the light of legislative exemptions and prosecutorial guidelines. Cancellation occurs where it is believed the evidence would not sustain prosecution or prosecution would not be appropriate, fair or proportionate. The procedures provide authority to district officers or inspectors acting as district officers and an inspector in the fixed charge processing office to cancel fixed charge notices. Cancellation can occur in circumstances where, for example, exemptions apply in relation to emergency vehicles or the wearing of seat belts, or where there are evidential difficulties, such as where the registration number registered by a speed camera does not correspond to the vehicle in question, or where there are emergency medical circumstances, such as, for example, a sick child being driven to hospital, an imminent birth, or a medical professional rushing to a sick or elderly patient. Access to cancel a fixed charge notice through Pulse is restricted to users with the rank of inspector or higher. The examination directed by the Commissioner into the allegations concerning the cancellation of fixed charge notices is continuing, and I expect to report on the findings shortly. I have received an interim report from the Commissioner, but I will not be making any further comment on any of the allegations until the final report is available. It would be premature and wrong to assume that all of these cancellations of fixed charge notices were inappropriate or that money has been lost to the Exchequer as a consequence. Equally, it is premature for calls to be made for a statutory inquiry into these matters. Let us await the final report on this matter, which I understand from the Commissioner is nearing completion, and I expect to receive it in approximately 2 weeks' time.
Margaret, Deputy Collins.
Thank you, Ceann Corder. I thank the Minister for his reply. I think you nearly be able to read it off by heart at this stage. You don't even need to read it off the paper that you're looking at. I think we were told in January that this report would come out. We're still waiting for it. You're saying now 2 weeks' time. Hopefully that's going to be the case. I wonder if the Minister does realise that the seriousness of the public interest in these issues, because it's not just on penalties, it goes broader than that, and we know that from the information that we receive from the whistleblowers. Just on that point of, I've originally put down a question to confirm a question I put in last month. I was asked by the Questions Office to change it and put this one in, and if I didn't put this one in, I wasn't going to get the original one in, which is specifically asking your response to the points I made last time was two members of the Judiciary. I'm not going to name them, so don't worry. And the question that I put specifically into you last month, and I didn't get a reasonable reply on that.
The reason why you're sorry, Deputy, if you resume your seat just for a moment, I want to explain. The Questions Office was trying to be helpful to you to get a question, in case people might think that you weren't allowed to question this issue. Sorry, just resume your seat just for one moment. The question that you put in accordance with standing orders, was out of order and was about to be disallowed. So in order to help you, That's the reason why I was contacted. So it's wrong to say that there was any interference in any question that you tabled. The simple way of dealing with it would have been just to disallow it. So I think in fairness to the Questions Office, I'd ask that you recognise that it was done trying to be helpful to you.
Thanks a lot, Cian. I recognise that the Questions Office has to work in the direction, but
They have to operate under standing orders.
I had a similar question in last time, and it wasn't ruled out of order or changed. And I think the point has to be made. There is no malice in relation to naming names. We wanted to raise the issue, how serious it was, and in relation to the thousands, as we have the information of penalty points being quashed, etc., that we need to get this addressed. And I'm hoping that the report you get back in 2 weeks' time will give some indication to it, and maybe in relation to the two members of the judiciary that would be clarified as well.
Thank you. Deputy McLaughlin. Have you? Deputy Crowe is...
All right, okay. Yeah, that's right. Thanks. Sorry, I didn't realise you were taking them all together.
Yeah, 10 and 17.
Yeah. Minister, all I would say is this, is that some of the other deputies have referred to whistleblowers within the force having brought into the public domain what they claim to be shoddy practice. The bottom line is this: the public needs to know, and it is limited to a number of districts apparently, it's not widespread, it was a number of areas, but it would be absolutely appalling and outrageous for the overwhelming majority of motorists who have, paid their fine, taken the points, took it on the chin and adapted their driving, to think that there was some arrangement. And this is an extremely serious matter. And unfortunately, sometimes it gets caught up in people being named and so on. But the bottom line is a huge number of road traffic offences have allegedly been written off of it. Any proper procedure being taken by senior members of the Gardaí. That's the allegations that a number of TDs are privy to. It's a very, very serious matter. And I appreciate, Minister, you're responsible. You'll await the report in 2 weeks' time. And I commend you for publishing the report. It needs to be done. But at that stage, we need a full, frank debate in this House about the report and its implications.
Thank you.
And where we go from there. Because it is a damn disservice to the overwhelming majority of the Gardaí who serve this state with great pride. And the issues that we've raised today, that maybe a small minority, we'll see how the report comes out, but the allegations are very serious.
Minister.
As Deputy McLaughlin knows, on a personal level, I have a lot of time for him, and I find it very difficult to personally criticise things he says. But I do have to just listen and sit back occasionally on this side of the House. We had only less than half an hour ago members from across the House, including Deputy McLaughlin, criticising me, as they're entitled to do, as being in some way responsible for what is reported to be the, quote, low morale, unquote, in the Garda force. And the deputies who want to talk about low morale in the Garda force in relation to one issue are then persistently making allegations against members of the Garda force that they don't properly conduct themselves, that they are basically a law unto themselves, that they're making decisions that they shouldn't be making. And the penalty point issue is a case in point. Now, I'm not going to prejudge it. I don't know whether issues have been dealt with properly or improperly. So unlike the deputies who raised the issue in the first place, I'm not going to prejudge the outcome. But if deputies who want to make the issue about low morale in the Garda force, talking about the difficulties in other areas, might just focus on whether they're contributing to a perception by some members of the force that they don't get the support they're entitled to, by constantly regurgitating this issue. Now, I take this issue seriously. I've taken it seriously since the allegations were first made. Within a very, very short time of the allegations being brought to my notice, after I had an opportunity to give consideration to them, I brought them to the attention of the Garda Commissioner and asked that the matter be fully investigated. That is now happening. And I'm not going to revisit it on an allegation-by-allegation basis, nor will I use it as a vehicle to name or not name either members of the House or describe limited groups of people in this House in a way that's designed to create a pejorative public perspective on them, which is what's been happening from the four deputies opposite me there. In fairness to Deputy McLaughlin, he's more circumspect in what he's saying. It's a serious issue. I await the outcome of the investigation. We will then address that outcome in a manner that's appropriate, and we will get answers. And as Minister, I want answers. But I just wonder, when we get the answers, whether the answers will be acceptable to everyone. I don't know what they will be. But I suspect that if they don't fit into the narrative of some people, they mightn't be happy, and if they do, they'll be celebratory. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but either way, let's not use this as a stick to damage the reputation of members of An Garda Síochána in the eyes of the general public. And let's not use this as a mechanism. And again, I don't include Deputy McLaughlin in this. I want to be very clear. Let's not use this as a mechanism to just, on a daily or weekly basis, get what's perceived to be a bit of beneficial personal publicity.
Deputy Wallace, quickly.
Thank you, Carla. Just, Minister, on the issue of the penalty points, you rubbished my assertion that the Commissioner was throwing cold water on the investigation. And I quote you from the Commissioner.
Sorry, you won't quote anything. You won't quote anything.
A supplementary question, not being to make it sorry. Okay. Please resume your seat.
Can I ask a supplementary question? Clear it up.
Please, you have to adhere to the rules of the House.
Would the Minister not think that an independent investigation was more likely to give us accountability and transparency?
Thank you.
Would you not agree with that, Minister?
I can assure the Deputy there will be transparency in the sense that I'm going to publish the outcome of this investigation. And then we'll make decisions as to what, if anything, next needs to be done. And we will be able to ascertain whether what has been alleged is true or untrue, and we'll be able to we may be able to ascertain whether the background to this is as simple as presented by the Deputy and his colleagues, or is a great deal more complex. Let's await the outcome, Deputy.
Thank you. That completes questions for today. Now moving on to topical issues. We got the list of topical issues. Topical issue number 1 is in the name of Deputy Anne Phelan to the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport, the need to ensure, by way of additional legislation if necessary, an adequate quality of windscreens in vehicles. You have 4 minutes, Deputy, to make your comment.
Thank you, Count Corley, for affording me the opportunity to speak in the House today on this topic, which is very important. Road safety has been a very serious issue in this country for some time, with a lot of people losing their lives or becoming badly injured on the nation's roads. And while the situation has somewhat eased in the last number of years, it's still unacceptable that so many people are killed or injured on our roads every year. There are many reasons for this, and although now is not the time to delve into that particular discussion, I would like to bring the attention of the House to one part of road safety that simply has to be further legislated for. According to a recent report by the Transport Research Laboratory, there are concerns over the quality of windscreen replacements in this country. In all the replacements that have taken place in the last year, 35% of them were found to have a safety or quality issue, and 14% were found to have serious signs of safety issues. And while I don't want to over-dramatise the situation here today, Count Corda, I think it is very important. The windscreen of a car now accounts for up to 30% of the structural integrity of the car, and it prevents the roof from collapsing if the car rolls over. Also, once the airbag has been activated, it relies on the support from the windscreen in order to make it work properly. A windscreen that is fitted properly is therefore crucial to the overall safety of the occupants of the car, and obviously an incorrectly fitted one could have significantly could significantly increase the potential for serious injury or worse in the event of an accident. In addition, windscreens are becoming increasingly complicated as car manufacturers have over the year added electronics to their construction, as well as tinting and curving them more than ever before. The industry is producing more and more complex windscreens, and we must be able to trust the appropriate company to replace them properly. However, there is little or no regulation exists in this area, and this is an area which is very crucial to road safety. And I might add, Councillor, that this is not just peculiar to Ireland, it also exists in other countries as well. As a member of the Joint Committee for Transport and Communications, it has been highlighted at this committee that there is another worry associated with this industry, and that is the practice of steering. Many insurance companies now offer policies that give free windscreen replacement to those who have their motor insurance with them. As policyholders with certain insurance companies, we are steered towards a particular windscreen company for a replacement. In order for a windscreen replacement company to get that business, standards are often cut and shortcuts are often taken. These insurance companies are trying to keep their costs down, so in order to get one of the lucrative contracts, windscreen replacement companies can be tempted to cut their costs by using inferior materials and using shoddy work practices, which in turn lead to a poor quality service. Consumers are entitled to have any component replaced or repaired so that the vehicle is as good as it was before the accident. But this problem is not helped by the lack of proper regulation governing this industry. However, most people are unaware of the lack of standards in the industry and are possibly driving around with, in some cases, perhaps a defective windscreen and one which may render their airbag useless. I'm looking forward to the Minister's reply on this, Councillor. And as I said before, I don't want to over-dramatise the situation, but I do think it is an important issue. I only had my own windscreen replaced about 4 weeks ago, and I was completely unaware that you have to go to reputable companies, and I didn't realise the windscreen was so important in the safety of the overall safety of the car. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Phelan, for raising this important issue. Indeed, I know it's something that is concerning you as you've spoken to me privately. So I want to thank you for raising it. The poor fitting of replacement vehicle windscreens is currently a consumer affairs matter relating to the delivery of a service which the Minister for Transport has no functional responsibility. However, if there are apparent flaws in the manner in which replacement windscreens are fitted, I believe that the issue would best be addressed by agreeing among all interested parties to improving training standards for windscreen replacement and by adopting an industry-wide operational code of practice, which I think the Deputy would welcome. Such agreement would necessitate a combined collaborative approach between the windscreen replacement industry, vehicle manufacturers and insurers within the Irish market in coming together to agree standards and the sanctioning of the installation of replacement vehicle windscreens by reputable, well-trained windscreen replacement technicians only. With regard to legislative provision relating to the service and/or repair of a vehicle, I am advised that at present there is no specific legislation governing windscreen repair and fitting companies, individuals, or indeed the standard of workmanship for fitting or repair of windscreens. However, there are regulations regarding the quality and fitness for purpose of a vehicle and of a vehicle component, and the standard of a service provided or performed in respect of a vehicle or a vehicle component. For example, the Sale of Goods Act 1893, as amended, provides that a good, which would include a windscreen, sold in the course of a business, must be of merchantable quality and must be reasonably fit for the purpose of which it was intended, and that a service, including a service or the repair of a vehicle, is subject to 4 requirements, namely 1, the supplier has the necessary skill to render the service, 2, the person supplying the service will do so with due skill and care and diligence, 3, where materials are used, they will be sound and reasonably fit for the purpose for which they are required, and 4, where goods are supplied under the contract, they will be of a merchantable quality. The Road Traffic Regulations 1963, SI 190 of 1963, as amended, requires windscreens to be made from a suitable material that is clear, stable, and will not splinter if fractured, i.e. either safety or laminated glass. Additionally, the European Community's Road Vehicle Entry into a Service Regulations 2009 requires replacement windscreens for European approved vehicles to be of the same standard and specification as the original windscreen fitted when the vehicle was manufactured. Compliance with this legislation is checked at the vehicle's periodic roadworthiness test when the windscreen is inspected to ensure that it is labelled with specific safety and approval markings. The windscreen is also visually checked to ensure that it is not damaged and is secure. Poor quality fitting of replacement windscreens, as raised by the Deputy in relation to the Transport Research Laboratories report, which had been commissioned by Oireachtas, was brought to the attention of the RSA, who have responsibility for vehicle standards policy. After reviewing the report, the RSA agreed that a correctly bonded windscreen plays an important role in the strength of a car in the event of a collision. Correctly fitted bonded windscreens may also play a role in the correct deployment of passenger side airbags, which the Deputy also raised. I understand that after reviewing the report, the RSA engaged with the Garda National Traffic Bureau, who advised that they are not aware of any incidents of ill-fitting windscreens being responsible for fatal or serious injury caused to any person in any collision. The RSA also engaged with the Irish Insurance Federation, who forwarded the report to motor damage claim specialists in a number of their member companies for comment. The IIF indicated that should Autoglass conduct further research, disclose safety and standards issues, they would be happy to work through the IIF and others to address them. The RSA concluded from the information contained in the TRL report that it appears that not all windscreen replacers are following the correct procedures, and workmanship when fitting windscreens, resulting in possible safety implications and value for money considerations for vehicle owners. RSA engineers reviewed the fitting process of a replacement windscreen and agree that in order to ensure a good bond is achieved between the windscreen and the vehicle, that a prescribed series of steps must be followed utilising manufacturers' recommended adhesives and curing times. As with many other vehicle repairs, a certain level of training, competence and quality assurance is required to ensure that individuals carrying out such work do it correctly to an appropriate standard and to manufacturers' specifications. In order to improve the standard of workmanship in the windscreen replacement industry, it is suggested that the industry engages with insurance companies, the Society of Irish Motor Industry and vehicle manufacturers to agree on standards, training, quality control and codes of practice that should be used when repairing or replacing windscreens. This approach of upskilling and training of windscreen fitters, combined with agreement from the insurance companies that only suitably trained individuals can carry out work on their behalf, will drive improvements in the standard of workmanship in this important area of vehicle safety. Both the Department and the RSA would welcome such developments and in general support any efforts that will improve the standard of the national fleet, including upskilling and training of those involved in the maintenance and repair of the vehicles in the national fleet. In the meantime, in the absence of such industry-wide agreement on the issue, I should point out that it is each vehicle owner's responsibility to ensure that his or her vehicle is in compliance with the law and maintained in a roadworthy condition at all times. Road traffic law places the onus on users of vehicles on public roads to ensure that the vehicles comply with the law and are safe. But I thank the Deputy for raising a really serious issue, which both the Department and the RSA will take quite seriously.
Could I say that the remainder of your script will appear in the official record? Deputy Phelan.
Thank you, Count Corda, and I'd like to thank the Minister for a very detailed and comprehensive reply. And yeah, I would like to ask the Minister perhaps to put pressure on the motor insurance company, who I feel also have their role to play in all of this as well. And one of the suggestions that I was going to make to the Minister was in the providing the accreditation of windscreen repair and replacement companies to a technical standard would have the effect of encouraging quality and safety in the market, and provide a mechanism which could be used to drive the improvements necessary. I would also ask the Minister, perhaps, and I sometimes think this is like, everything when in doubt, you throw it in, into education, but it's around the area of perhaps the NCT test might have a role to play in this as well, where I believe that they can do a pressure test, or a pressure test can be developed to see, or it proves if the windscreen has been fitted properly. But I do take everything that the Minister says on board, and we look forward to perhaps seeing developments in this. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank the Deputy for raising this issue. Certainly there's food for thought in the issue in the way in which it was raised as well. We are looking at the whole issue of code of practice and seeing if that can be encouraged. And the comments in relation to the NCT and that are certainly issues that we will be pursuing through the department to see if there is a requirement to look at the standards again and see is there something that does need to be addressed. Certainly the issue that has been raised was worthy of being raised, and I thank the Deputy for doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Next is Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan to the Minister for Health. Funding for community and residential mental health services since implementation of a vision for change.
Agus bhfuil mar gohfuil agus arm agus buchas a gohfuil live Fishgoil an Oireachtas Phléigean inniu agus ceapan gohfuil sé réichnach go madamid an Oireachtas cuasaí cláinte intine os ar Goramach. We know the plan, which is the multidisciplinary mental health teams that will be community-oriented and allow people access treatment but without hospitalisation. But it's not moving as efficiently as it should. And apart from the human advantages, there are significant economic advantages also. So the money for mental health has not always gone into mental health where we know it is needed. And the first point I'd like to make is the need for a system that would reliably track expenditure on mental health, as the HSE doesn't have a care group accounting. So I think there is a need for an information system or some system that would track the activities of community-based mental health services, and therefore we would know exactly about the funding. I want to draw attention to the report of the 1st of February from the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture and Other Degrading Treatment and Punishment, Mr. Juan Mendes, and he was looking at abuses in healthcare settings that may cross a threshold of mistreatment that's really a form of torture or cruel and degrading treatment. And he was looking at mental health legislation within the UN Convention and the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and he established, and I want to quote, that community living with support is no longer a favourable policy development, but an internationally recognised right. So, what we know is that community mental health services are not an established right here. Now, the first proposal was in 1984, then again in 06 with a vision for change, but we're still waiting for the move from residential care and institutions to community care. So the policy has been there for over 30 years, but not exactly the practice. So I want to support Amnesty's call for legislation in this area, so health authorities will be duty-bound to account for and ultimately deliver community mental health services. And also from Mr. Mendes' report, there's a call for legal provisions to be revised, provisions at the moment that allow detention on mental health grounds in mental health facilities, and that allow coercive interventions and treatments in mental health settings without the free and informed consent by the person concerned. The report also called for a ban on forced and non-consensual medical interventions for persons with disabilities, whether that's psychosurgery, electric shock treatment, mind-altering drugs, restraint, solitary confinement. So I would really like to know where we are on those particular matters. There's also the issue of the appointment of the Director for Mental Health Services and where that process is at the moment. And will that person, he or she, have budgetary control and also an implementation plan for delivery of a vision for change? And finally then, staffing, and I've discussed this, I've had priority questions, etc. here with both Minister Riley and Minister for State Kathleen Lynch. The staffing issue is very significant and very serious. Between March 09 and December 12, 12.1% drop in staffing in mental health services. Basically, the delays that occurred in 12, we do not want them to occur in 2013, but there has to be visible accounting of what is happening with the funding and the staffing for mental health.
Thanks, Deputy. Minister Brian Hayes and the Minister's 4 minutes.
Last Count Corona, can I thank Deputy O'Sullivan for raising this very important issue and apologise for the inability of both Minister Riley and Minister Lynch to be here today in the House. In line with the agreed programme for government, the government has prioritised the reform of our mental health services and is committed in particular to the delivery of more and better quality care in the community as envisaged in a vision for change. When she referred to the 1984 document, I laughed to myself because I remember I was in school at the time and I did a special report on that document that was published in 1984, A Vision for Change, which was all about moving to a community model. and I remember it distinctly and well as to the context of that report at that stage. Implementing the recommendations of the report has been slower than obviously originally expected, having been delayed by a number of factors, including the changed economic context, constraints in public spending, and the moratorium on recruitment. However, with regard to the residential services, a great deal of progress has been made with the accelerated closure of old psychiatric hospitals and their replacement with bespoke new facilities, such as Phoenix Care Centre, opened recently at St Brendan's, Gormanstown. Beyond new capital developments, progress also encompasses shorter circumstances of inpatient care and involvement of users in all relevant aspects of mental health policy and service. That is one of the big fundamental changes, Deputy, as you are aware, in recent years, where people now within the mental health service have advocates, have people who actually argue as to what they require in terms of their service locally. That has been the most fundamental change. And that is right the way across the mental health service in this country, and it's something that I think has given an additional voice for people who need help and to articulate that help. The vision document recommended a number of mental health services best delivered in the community, as the Deputy said, and as she's aware, a special allocation of 35 million was provided in 2012 for mental health to strengthen community mental health teams in both adult and children's mental health services. By providing an additional 414 full-time posts to enhance suicide prevention measures, initiate psychological and counselling services in primary care, specifically for people with mental health problems, and advance relocation of mental health services users from institutional care towards independent living arrangements. The full utilisation of this 2012 funding, together with a further €35 million for the new service, which was put in place for 2013, represents a total of €70 million extra revenue, with over 800 associated new mental health posts to improve and reform services. Recruitment of 307 of the additional 410 posts was approved in 2012 and has completed, and the HSE is aiming to fill the remaining posts by the end of March this year. So in the next number of weeks, Deputy, I hope to be able to report progress in this area for the remaining places of the 410 posts, where we give a guarantee for those additional posts to be put in place. Under the National Implementation Framework for the National Housing Strategy 2011 to 2016 for people with a disability and mental health issues, initial funding of €1 million has been made available from the Department in 2013 to support the commencement of the transitioning of people from the existing setting into more independent mainstream housing options. The renewed investment in mental health also facilitates the full implementation of the clinical programmes in this area and will drive service delivery and consistency, with a major emphasis on early intervention and improved collaborations with the primary care system to ensure that the provision of a 21st standard mental health service exists in this country. I wish to stress that Ireland has a strong human rights record. The protection of such rights is central to both our domestic and foreign policies. The practical fulfilment of this objective is, of course, paramount, including proper reflection in evolving policies and settings across a wide range of health and personal social services. And in conclusion, the Deputy referred to the most recent report, which has been conducted by the Special Rapporteur, Mr. Mendes. There are very significant findings in that report in terms of the setting that is now chosen for the majority of people in this country with mental health issues. And I understand from the Department that they are studying in detail the report and will issue their considered view of that report in due course.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy O'Sullivan, you have 2 minutes for a supplementary.
All right, thank you. I take heart from the fact that the Department is looking at this particular report and is going to issue their findings on it. But it's very difficult to accept what you were saying there. about the budget cuts recently and the moratorium, because we know that this issue of mental health hasn't just suddenly appeared on the agenda. So since 1984, I think Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Labour, other parties have been in power, and it has not been a priority. We know that. So I will say that it does appear to be becoming a priority now in recent times. But what was promised in 2012 did not materialise, and of course the fear of mental health settings is that the same thing will happen in 2013. So I think the point is that political will alone hasn't worked when it comes to proper funding of mental health services. And that's why bringing in this other idea that the different approach is needed, which is this duty-bound legislation to be enacted so that the HSE will be obliged to account for how it is moving in this area, that there would be regular reports, that they would be open and they'd be transparent, and perhaps annual reports to the committee here. And particularly also in the other area of developing the mental health services for those with an intellectual disability. So that's why I've just asked that would be taken on board, and I think it is suggested in that report, so I presume the HSE will respond to this. Just one final point, spending on community mental health has been static at 27%, and the spending on residential care has been 58% consistently. Now I do want to acknowledge the opening of the Phoenix Centre. I was there, and what I found very disturbing was that the media seemed to pay more attention to Minister Riley and Minister Lynch being stuck in a lift than they did to looking at the area of mental health and the amazing facility that has been opened there. And it was an opportunity to have looked at the whole area of mental health in a much more progressive and productive way than instead focusing on this mishap in a lift.
Thanks, Deputy Minister.
Well, I don't disagree at all with what the Deputy said. There is a lot of common sense in what she said, because the issue should be focused on its merits rather than frivolities or otherwise of people getting stuck in lifts. And there's a message there for the media and for those who pander to the media with simplistic commentary rather than detailed policy work. She is right in saying that even with the cutbacks, there has been a renewed commitment on the part of this government, and I know Minister Lynch in particular, who has taken a huge interest in this area, to give commitments on funding. And I think fair is fair here. In a circumstance where the cuts have occurred, a special allocation of an additional 35 million was placed last year, as she said. Our commitment was to have an additional 414 places. As of now, 307 of those are in place, and a commitment has been given that the great majority of the remaining number will be in place within a matter of weeks. There was also a commitment in the budget of 2013, as I understand, that an additional 35 million would be put in place to allow these additional posts to be filled. So even in very difficult times, when budgets are being cut, this is an area where actually budgets are expanding, because we recognise there has been a real deficit in the number of trained personnel working in this area. If we have these people in place, which I expect, because of the notes I have here in front of me, they will be in place by March of this year, I think that will represent an increase of 70 million an increase of 70 million in the last 2 years, and an additional 800 new posts over a longer period of time. Slowly but surely, we're beginning to recognise the need for proper services within mental health, as she rightly says. And even in difficult times, we can still do this. And I'm sure she and others would be encouraging the Minister to get even bigger budgets and have bigger supporting personnel. There is an issue, as I think she rightly points out, it is how the developments in this area are going to find their way in terms of practical impact across the HSE service. And that's something we need to be very mindful of. We shouldn't have doctrinaire ideological views about something. If there's evidence-based that a better system needs to be put in place, or at least a more flexible system, we need to be minded of that and to change policy accordingly.
Thanks, Minister. The third matter selected in the names of Deputies Simon Harris, Andrew Doyle and Billy Timmins to ask the Minister for Health the future of St. Catherine's Special Needs Services in Newcastle, County Wicklow. The deputies have 6 minutes, 2 minutes each. Deputy Harris.
Thank you very much, Cahirlock, and thank you for selecting this topical debate today. Today, Minister, the parents of children with special needs in County Wicklow really need and want to hear from the HSE and from the Department of Education about the future plans for St. Catherine's and all the services that it provides to children in our country, in our county rather. Yesterday, sadly, 58 superb staff members were let go. Today, parents in Wicklow are worried, frustrated, angry and confused. They don't know what's going on. Now, I understand, along with my colleagues, that a meeting will take place on Monday with the Board of Directors for all parents who have children in St Catherine's, and that's a very important process. But the 5 Wicklow TDs, and I recognise Deputy Donnelly, who's here, and Deputy Ferris, who's out of the country, we're all working together on this in an effort to try to ensure that services are retained. I know there are serious corporate governance and financial management issues within the organisation, but my priority and the priority of the people in County Wicklow is to see services retained and to see the level of care retained. Everything done in St Catherine's was done for the good of children with special needs. The service grew out of need and grew out of love. Clearly there are very serious issues, and the new Board of Directors in St Catherine's very much acknowledge that and have been working so hard over the last month to attempt to rectify that. These issues must be addressed, but we here, from our perspective, we need the HSE and we need the Department of Education to work together to meet with the new Board of Directors and to put in place a structure that can ensure that these services can be retained, be they health services, educational services or residential services. This service in St Catherine's was a unique service. We need to make sure that it continues. Yes, there needs to be significant changes, but we need assurances to be given to parents of children in this service that their services will be retained and that the issues will be addressed.
Thanks, Deputy Timmins.
It's most important that we as a society and we as a government protect those that are most vulnerable in our society. In recent years, there has been a lot of concern expressed by disadvantaged groups that they feel that they're taking a disproportionate cut in the services that are actually provided to them. I am hopeful and I'm confident that in this situation that will not be the case. St Catherine's set up several decades ago as a voluntary organisation to provide services for those with intellectual disability. On a voluntary basis, many people campaign, fundraise, work, put many hours into establishing the service when the state provided very little, if any service at all in that area. And it has developed and it has grown and provides an excellent service to many, many families along the east coast of Wicklow. I know that actually it is going through change at the moment, but I do think it is... 1 minute. I do think that it's very important, and I would call on the Minister, and I'm aware that the Minister has had dealings with the HSE in this area over the last couple of months, that she gets out, the message, firstly, that the service that's provided will not suffer, that in whatever manner the service has been revamped, that the facilities and service that is available to the residents and families of St Catherine's at the moment remains in place. It's important to acknowledge the excellent work done by the many volunteers down the years, and hopefully once we go through this process that people will be reassured, and I welcome the decision of the Board of Directors to meet with the families over the next few days to reassure them that that service will stay in place. But the Minister can go a long way to reassuring people and public that this isn't a case of a cutting back in the service. This is a case of revamping a service.
Thanks, Deputy Andrew Doyle.
Thanks, Carla. Like my colleagues, I'm just glad to have the opportunity just to address this subject. St Catherine's was established in a time when either families or people who had an interest in special needs had to push harder than they do today for anything they got. They got a service in place, they got money, they established the service. There was no such thing as service level agreements, corporate governance or anything else. So out of that sort of era, this service was born, and it's the property of not just the families, but of a community who feels like they established it. And this weekend, a local Lions Club will be running a fundraiser for St Catherine's. They run vintage car runs, all sorts of efforts to put money in to enhance the services that are provided by state funding through the Department of Health or the HSE and the Department of Education. It's unfortunate that this day has come.
You have 1 minute.
It is regrettable that it has come to this. There are issues that need to be addressed. They have needed to be addressed for some time, and it behoves everybody involved to get proactive in the engagement in resolving the issues. I think it's very important at this stage that the families, the parents and the children who are service users are reassured about the quality and the type of service that will remain once this process is completed. I think that's the most important thing, and I would urge that the senior management within St Catherine's, with or without people in the HSE, meet with the parents and give them that reassurance and explain to them exactly what has gone on. I mean, there has been too much up in the air for the last 6 months, and it's an unfortunate consequence that we came to today. So I ask the Minister to bring that message back to the Minister and back to the people who, the relevant people involved in this. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. Minister Brian Hayes. The Minister has 4 minutes.
Firstly, can I thank my colleagues, Deputies Timmins, Doyle and Harris for raising this issue as a topical issue. I can understand people's concern and the necessity to use this chamber to have a very clear statement on the part of both ministers in the Department of Health and indeed the Minister with responsibility for education. I have to say, Laskin Curl, I know of St. Catherine's. When I was education spokesperson on that side, I think I worked with them on a number of issues in terms of special educational needs support. And I take the point that Deputy Doyle raised, that this isn't just an issue of a local concern. It's more important actually, because St. Catherine's is a fundamental part of the national infrastructure in terms of educational support for children with special needs. So I'm aware that the deputies, and I understand all deputies in the constituency of Wicklow, are concerned about the future of the service in St. Catherine's in the context of difficulties which have emerged in relation to financial and governance issues, and in particular the fact that St. Catherine's has decided that a number of current employees will not have their contracts renewed. I think it's important to reassure deputies and the wider community that the HSE and the Department of Education are working closely with the service to ensure it will be sustainable for the future. St. Catherine's Association delivers services to children with intellectual disability and is a very valued service provider to people in the area. Services currently provided include multidisciplinary support services to approximately 250 children in St. Catherine's Special School, and early services including preschool to a number of children on the autistic spectrum. It also provides residential places for 11 children and 2 adults, and respite services for approximately 75 children. The HSE provides funding to St. Catherine's Association, which in 2012 amounted in the region of €9 million under a grant as provided for by Section 39 of the Health Act 2004. The Department of Education and Skills funds the educational elements of the service separately. In that context, I am assured by the Department of Education that St. Catherine's Special Needs School remains open to its pupils. The difficulties currently being experienced, Gaelic, do not concern the education provided to the children, and the Department of Education officials have arranged to meet with the school tomorrow morning to discuss the current difficulties and to assist the school. St. Catherine has grown significantly over a very short time frame in an unsustainable way. The HSE recognises the value of this service and is anxious to help the organisation to return to sustainability as soon as possible. A financial and governance review is being finalised by the HSE at present, and the aim of the very close engagement by the HSE is to ensure that this valuable service can continue on a sustainable footing. As part of the resolution of the matter, Laskin Corla, I understand that St. Catherine's has decided in recent days that it will not be renewing the contracts of a number of staff attached to the educational part of the service. While I understand this may be of concern to parents of children who attend St. Catherine's, it's important to note that it is in everyone's interest that the service be run in a financially sustainable way. I understand that Minister of State Kathleen Lynch, TD, recently met with all of the TDs for County Wicklow and emphasised that every effort is being made to assist this organisation, and in particular the children and parents who rely on its services. The aim of this is to protect services for families in a sustainable way.
Minister, Deputies Harris, Dial and Timmins, now you have 3 minutes, a minute each.
Thank you, Gairlac, and thank you, Minister, for that response. I think it's particularly encouraging to hear that the education officials are going to meet with management in St Catherine's tomorrow, and I think that's good news to hear that the Department of Education is now going to engage. You're quite correct. Our aim here collectively as a group of TDs is to protect the services that are in place, and I hope that the meeting on Monday between the new Board of Directors and the parents will help pave that pathway forward. It is, though, really important to put on the record of this House that the St Catherine's service is unique, and therefore it may be necessary to look at new methods of funding and new methods of the Department of Education and the Department of Health and the HSE working together to continue to deliver some of the very innovative services which I believe really make St Catherine's a centre of excellence. So I thank you for your response and look forward to us working together to protect this service going forward.
Deputy Timmins.
Minister, I'd like to thank you for your very comprehensive and positive response. I do regret the fact that a number of people will lose their jobs, those that are on short-term contract, and I would hope that they can be re-employed somewhere in a similar area. It is reassuring what you've actually informed us, but if I was to have a criticism, it is that, you know, this issue hasn't taken off legs as such, but there have been a few days, a few weeks of a lot of uncertainty for families, and perhaps if I do have a regret, it's that the HSE didn't keep the public representatives in the area briefed on exactly what was actually happening. And if we had this, the contents of your speech maybe a couple of days ago, that, you know, it could have saved difficulty for some people in some areas. But once again, thanks, and we acknowledge the commitments that are made here by you this evening on behalf of the Minister and welcome them.
Deputy Doyle.
Yes, just briefly, Cahill. I think the fact that the Department of Education have reaffirmed that their contribution to the education system of teaching of the children here is not going to change. But what will need to be discussed in some detail is the relationship between HSE, the management of St Catherine's and the Department of Education, because there has been some sort of tangling of the wires in that area, and what was part of a €9 million budget for care may have been become part of an education stream of funding as well. So this is the whole nub of the problem with regard to governance. And I think 9 million in anyone's language is a substantial amount of money for a service, and you could probably never give enough. But at the same time, there has been no departmental or HSE cuts in this area, and that's important to remember. So it's a matter of getting the governance structures right and rebuilding from there. The Minister did say finally that it grew in an unsustainable way very quickly. So it's not that long ago that it was sustainable. So it should be possible to bring it back to that sustainable model which has served so well for over 30 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. Minister Hayes, you have two minutes.
I very much take on board the points that have been made by the three deputies last Ceann Comhairle. And can I say this in the most direct way possible in response to what Deputy Timmins said? There is a responsibility on the part of the HSE where an issue like this is coming up, that it informs local elected public representatives, be they members of this House or other houses, to help assuage the community. There's nothing as bad as a vacuum. And clearly, I hope the HSE and others will learn lessons from this, that they simply cannot go around the place without informing elected representatives of the people, who understandably will take queries and concerns from constituents. And I hope that they learn the lessons from this, because that information wasn't put there. That's no fault of the Minister. On the contrary, Minister Lynch, as you well know, met with all of the deputies concerned last week, and I think on foot of her intervention made it abundantly clear to both the Department of Health and Education that the deputies should be properly informed of this, and that the parents in particular of the children concerned would not be feared unduly. This is a unique setting. We have a special school here, one of a myriad of a number of special schools around the country. You also have an adult setting here, and you also have respite services provided here. So between a number of different subheads of expenditure, the total expenditure has got to be properly sustained and has to be dealt with in a way which is sustainable. And I think, as Deputy Doyle said, there are governance issues here which I'm sure the HSE and others will work through. But I think what Minister Lynch wants me firmly to say on the record of this House is, on foot of her representations, that a meeting will occur tomorrow morning with the school from the Department of Education, and I very much welcome that. And I'm grateful for the opportunity of replying on her behalf to put that information into the public domain, and that we shouldn't give undue concern to parents, because the service will remain. There may be changes in the funding model, but it is crucially important that we get the funding model back on a sustainable level so that these excellent services can be provided to the young people who use this service, which, as I said at the opening, isn't just important to the people of County Wicklow, but is part and parcel of a network of special schools around the country who provide a really fantastic service to children with challenging behavioural issues.
Thanks, Minister. The fourth matter is selected in the name of Deputy Michael Moynihan, who asked the Minister for Communications, Energy and Natural Resources the need to ensure a viable future for the miscanthus industry by fully implementing the refit scheme. The Deputy has 4 minutes to make an initial statement.
Good morning, and I thank you for the opportunity to raise this issue. I suppose, like many people throughout the country, and particularly where the miscanthus has been growing and people have invested huge amount of money in it, there is a worry for the entire industry, and there's a worry for the industry at risk going forward. The fear is in jeopardy because there is a belief out that the Department of Communications, Energy and Natural Resources have not adjusted the refit scheme accordingly in order to allow the entire crop to be sold to the Eden Dairy Power Station in the coming weeks. And I suppose as we go forward, the biggest difficulty with it is that there are a number of people that have invested, and we could waffle at length in relation to it. The clear difficulties are that people have invested a huge amount of money over the last number of years to develop and to grow almost 6,000 acres of miscanthus